Yeah.
That's your big introduction?
I'm gonna try that again.
No,
Okay.
we're going with it. We're going. Hi, this is Mr. Sapora and
Rory Sullivan.
Hi. And we're bringing you today's species list. Species list number 4, the Cnidarians. Oh, no, sorry. Echinodermata. Cnidarians were last week. Okay, so I'm going to blow this up here, and we'll go over this real quick. My version of quick. So the group that we're talking about this week is another phylum, right? Another group of organisms within the animal kingdom, and this is a pretty unique group. The echinoderms have been around a long time, and they have some pretty cool features that all of them have in common that are unique. They're more complex, definitely, than a Cnidarian, but they're not vastly complex. They don't have brains or eyes or anything like that. They do have some pretty cool characteristics. Roadster, what's up?
A question or comment. This isn't this starfish a type of starfish? And when you dissect them, you can really see what parts are parts, right?
Yeah, because you've dissected them before, haven't you, in class and stuff? Yeah, you can see down inside of them. This image here is kind of one that has been, virtually dissected up, and you can see their internal parts. Again, not the most complex, but they have some cool features to them. So here's how you pronounce this. It's Echinoderm. Echinoderm, right?
I know that.
And basically, dermata refers to skin, and the echino part is spiny, so they have kind of spiny skin. So here's one of the features that they all have in common. They have a water vascular system. So they have a vascular system kind of similar to like we do with veins and arteries. So, a liquid will carry nutrients around to specific areas of their body, which is cool, but they don't have blood. They just use water from the ocean, and they pump it in through this little valve right here called a madreporite, and it reminds me of the little valve on like a basketball or a volleyball or a soccer ball where you put air into it. And then they use that pump to walk around, and they walk on this system of little tube feet. And you've flipped over a starfish, you've kind of seen that. Each little tube feet is connected to this water vascular system, and then these little ampulla, little pumps that kind of pump and add tension to the tube feet. So they have hundreds, maybe even thousands of these little things that can work independently, and it's how they move, and it's how they grab things, and it's how they do their business. Rory.
What is their main part of the body that keeps them energizing and moving around?
Well, good question. The main part of their body, they have a stomach, and that stomach, when we look at starfish, there's a video I believe I have posted on here that you can click to that shows, but the stomach is right in here in the middle, and it actually ejects outside of them, and then they digest food, and then they use that food to basically move and flex the muscles that are connected to their water vascular system.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it is. And then these little digestive glands here, similar to like your pancreas or liver, help them digest food really rapidly. So they eat things like clams, and they latch on with their little tube feet, and then they rip the clam open, and then they eject their stomach out. So the stomach is still connected, but imagine if instead of eating food, putting it in you, Rory, if we had here on the table a hamburger, instead of putting it in your mouth, you went like, and then your stomach flopped out of your mouth, landed on top of the burger. All of this digestive fluid from these digestive glands shot through your stomach, so your stomach was like this big wet bag that covered the burger, and then it dissolved the burger, and you sucked all the nutrients into your tissue. And then when you were done, you'd suck your stomach back up, and you would be full of nutrients, and you'd move on to the next thing.
So technically, you would spit out your stomach, and then would just swallow it whole.
That's what they do. Yeah.
Another question.
I gotta move on. But what's your question?
I want a question for your high schooler students. If they were a starfish, what would they depend on the most?
Okay. Your assignment is, if you were a starfish, what would you depend on the most? What type of food would you like to eat? Is that kind of what you're asking? Or what part of the ocean would you like to live in? Okay, so you can enter that into the comment thread, please, of the YouTube. That would be wonderful. All right, so they contract muscles, as we just talked about, right? They use the energy from the food to flex these muscles. That's what things use energy for, to move. And that's how they pump up their system. Pump it up when your water feet are pumping. When the beat is thumping, pump up the jam, pump up. Okay. Function and locomotion, feeding and respiration. That's what their water vascular system does. It does all these things, right? It's kind of a cool system. They have no central brain. They have a radial nerve net. So it's just a circle of nerves. Each one they can communicate with, so one leg can communicate with the other, but they don't really do any thinking. They just kind of move along, act, and go. Will you go grab my plug, please, for me? Man. So no brain, just a simple eye spot. Okay. Moving on. I was going to make some joke about, something, I forget what. They can regenerate lost or damaged tissue, including whole limbs, organs, and some can produce asexually from a single limb. So starfish, if you cut one arm off and throw it in the water, they can grow a new starfish from that. And it's basically because they're such a simple organism.
That is amazing.
That they don't have a brain, so it's not like you left the brain behind or the heart, right? They kind of, each arm kind of has all the parts to make the rest of them, which is kind of cool. Okay, we're going to move on and get into the species now. I'm going to move kind of quickly through these. So the first one is the most popular starfish out there, and by popular I mean probably one of the most abundant out there, and that is the, I gotta plug my computer in here. Okay, that is the ochre sea star, Pisaster ocraceus. This is the one that we see in all of our tide pools throughout the area. So this one comes right up into the tide line, so we see this one. It hides behind rocks when the tide goes out in the shady side of them. And there's a variety of colors within this one species. In fact, some have a combination of colors. Usually they are one color or the other.
That's really cool.
Okay. The pronunciation for this is Pisaster ocraceus. Say it with me, Rory. Pisaster ocraceus. Ocraceus. Okay. These were really affected in the last decade by the sea star wasting disease, and this was a virus. It's of unknown origin that came in, I think, right around 2011 was when it first started, and it wiped out our local populations all up and down Oregon, Washington, and through Canada, California as well, of this particular species and other starfish as well, knocking their population down some 90% in some areas. They have rebounded, and they feed primarily on California mussel, Mytilus californianus, and we'll learn that one here probably next week, I believe, somewhere in the next week or two. Again, their stomach pops out, and here's an article I linked on sea star wasting syndrome and a video on their stomach popping out. Okay, next up is the sunflower starfish, Pycnopodia helianthoides. And so let's say this one together. Pycnopodia, helianthoides. Pycnopodia helianthoides. Long name, huh? So, pycno is referring to many, podia refers to feet, and helianth, helical, actually refers to the sun, the rays of the sun. So a helicopter actually is referring to the blades coming out like the rays of the sun. And the term hell actually then derives from that as well, as being a place where the sun exists, or it's very hot in mythological, folklore. Largest sea star in the world. These suckers are huge, 3 feet across. A 3-foot sea star, Rory, with 26 arms. They can weigh up to 11 pounds. Serious business. They feed on all kinds of things, and they can move by rolling, actually. And again, I have another video linked right here that you could check out. Rory, question.
Where do the sunflower sea star live?
Good question. They're right here in our ocean. We'll have to go out sometime at a really low tide. You can find them at the lowest tide. And then they live out where it's always covered in water. So they're out there just, where it's like 20, 30, 40, 50 feet deep. I've seen them in the bays when I've been diving, small ones as well. Okay. One of my favorite ones is the basket star. I love it for so many reasons. It is a plankton-feeding starfish, right? So it is still 5-armed. But you're looking at this going, how can this be 5 arms? I see 5,000. Well, here's how it works. They have 5 arms, and each of those arms has arms that come off of that, and then each of those arms has arms that come off of that, and each of those arms has arms that come off of that. So imagine if on your hand, in the end of each finger, you had a little hand, and that little hand had little fingers, and on the end of that little hand's fingers were other little hands, and on the ends of those little hands' fingers, there were other little hands. They were all waving at you at the same time, really creepily. Hi, Rory.
So technically, there's the main part of the 5 hands that bring out all the other little fingers and hands, but it's a basket star and it has 5 things because the 5 main parts of it.
Yep. Starfish and echinoderms tend to be what we call 5 meris, meaning that they're built in a blueprint of 5, right? There's 5 sides to them as you go around.
So they're like almost like a pentagon animal.
Pentagon. Yeah, penta meaning 5. So we call them pentamerous. 5 sides or 5 limbs. They feed on, again, plankton. They occur pretty deep down in the ocean. They take advantage of vertical migration, which we had learned about when we learned about plankton. The fact that zooplankton, animal plankton, move down during the daytime to the deeper ocean to get away from predators, and then at nighttime they migrate up, the little shrimp and krill do, to eat the phytoplankton, but where they can't be as readily seen by small fish and things like that. As this happens, the vertical migration, these guys will, basket stars will climb to the tops of little outcrops in the water, and just their little arms will sweep and grab all those little copepods, and then that one hand will pass it to the other, pass it to the other, pass it to the other, pass it to the other until it gets to their stomach in the middle. And all these arms are working independently at the same time. Really watch this video that I have because it's pretty legit. It shows them feeding.
How do fish or people at the beginning of time when they discovered these tell these apart from corals or sea sponges? Because they almost look like a coral that's almost like a coral flower.
Good point. So how would people tell these apart? Probably for a long time, people thought these were just a type of coral, right? They're radial, like a coral is, and it wasn't until biologists, probably in the 1700s, with this guy named Carl Linnaeus, started organizing all the different things that they found in nature, living things, into different groups based on really looking closely at their parts. Right, so dissecting them, looking at their parts and going, oh no, wait, these have a water vascular system, and corals don't have that, right? They have little bones in their skin. Corals don't have that. So these are actually more, like these. And so that's called classification. It's a great question. Next one up is the purple sea urchin. This is one that we're pretty familiar with. These are really abundant here in where they do occur. They like tide pools, but they like kind of deeper tide pools, but you can find them here when the tide goes out. And then they kind of congregate, and when the tide goes out, in these bowls cut in the rock, these kind of splash zones. And they'll burrow little holes into them. They're only about 4 inches across, so, maybe about as big around as my little mouse here. But they can live to be 70 years old.
Whoa.
There are sea urchins out there that outdate me, that are as old as my grandparents, which is just crazy to think about. And with their spines that they have, they will slowly burrow holes in the rock, and they'll go back to that same hole every day when the tide goes out to kind of hide and then stay wet. When the tide comes in, they leave, and they have a little 5 meris, again, bony plates that stick out of their bottom. You can't see it underneath. You flip them over. They have a little hole underneath, and the little bones will rasp, and they eat algae. So they'll eat they'll eat bull kelp. They'll eat all the big algae that we see and small algae off the rock. So they're a little herbivore. Yeah.
Do because they live up so long, that sort of gives me a feeling, do they live so long because they help the environment underwater, or they don't help the environment? Because I'm thinking, because they make holes, that might help the environment for like the fish to hide from big predators.
You know, they do make habitat for all kinds of tiny things that crawl in those holes. That's a really good point. I think because maybe they're herbivores, they have a low metabolism, meaning that they kind of move slow, and so maybe they can live longer that way. I'm not quite sure why they live so long. It's an interesting thing. They are a food source for a really cool animal that relies on them, sea otters. Sea otters love these things.
Their jaws can break them apart.
Yeah, and sea otters will often put a rock on their chest and then use another rock and then lay on their backs, grab them, and then smash them. Break them open and then eat them. In Alaska, where sea otter populations are abundant, the kelp forests are extensive. They stretch for miles around the islands up there. Here, because we don't have sea otters, because sea otters were removed from this area through over-harvesting and hunting in the 1800s, early 1900s, our kelp forests have been greatly reduced, because there's nothing to keep the sea urchins in check. So the sea urchins just eat all the kelp, and there's no predators for them. So some places when you go diving here, it's just sea urchins everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. And if sea otters were here, they would keep that population lower. And then in keeping that population lower, more kelp would grow. And so we'd see more extensive kelp forest. And that would increase our fish populations because kelp forests are so important for fish. So this little organism here, combined with the sea otter, plays a huge role in the entire nearshore marine ecosystem, or what we call the neritic benthic zone.
Technically, the seals, it makes the sea urchins help the environment and also not help the environment.
It keeps it balanced, right? When you say help and not help at the same time, that's find the middle balance. Okay, the scientific names for these are long and strong, so let's say them together, folks. Rory, say it after I say it, okay? Gorgon.
Gorgon.
Ocephalus.
Ocephalus.
Gorgonocephalus.
Gorgonocephalus.
Eucnemis.
Gorgonocephalus eucnemis.
Nice job. So the scientific name for basket star, gorgon, means grotesque, and cephalus means head or face. So their scientific name means gross face. Isn't that cool?
It doesn't even have a face.
I know. I'm going to start calling you a gorgonocephalid. The purple sea urchin has another cool and awesome name. It is Strongylocentrotus purpuratus. Strongylocentrotus purpuratus. Strongylocentrotus purpuratus. Gotcha. Okay.
What does that mean?
Purple sea urchin?
I would rather be called that.
Okay, last two here. Pacific sand dollar is an echinoderm. It is related to starfish. And sea urchins, it's kind of a flattened sea urchin is how I would think about this. Sand dollars are unique organisms. They are all across the planet, and these are a filter feeder. So they tend to kind of situate themselves at a perpendicular angle. And what I mean by that is like a 45-degree angle in the water. They occur in huge colonies called beds, so sand dollar beds. And you can see them kind of sticking themselves up here in the water. And they kind of bury themselves half in, and then they like to be in areas where there's a lot of motion. So currents and things like this, the mouths of bays or estuaries are right offshore. And as the water surges back and forth and washes over them, they have tiny little tube feet. What makes them purpley in this color is all the little tube feet, and they catch and eat all the plankton that is being washed around them. And then they pass it into their mouth, and their mouth is on the underside. So
that answers my question.
Their mouth is this little hole right here. Here's a good one.
Yeah.
Here's their mouth in the bottom, and see these little grooves? They call these groove feet. When they catch the plankton, they pass it down into these grooves, and then one arm passes to the other until they eat.
That answers my question. I was going to say, why did they get their color when they're alive and they don't when they're dead, because the little feet don't take in the plankton because they're dead, so it turns white and feet
It's
die.
their skeleton. Their bones.
Then would it die after if you take one from underwater? Would it die after like a week or two on like above water from on Earth?
Because these guys don't even occur in tide pools. They're always underwater. I think it would probably die within an hour of being on land. Maybe less. I mean, if you held me underwater for an hour, I'd be done. Right? 5 minutes. 2 minutes, right? I'm old. I got the Rona. I'm just kidding. I know.
I won't be sitting by you then.
True, we'd have to be 6 feet apart. Okay. Read the notes on these. They're pretty cool. Scientific name for this is Dendraster
Dendraster.
eccentricus.
Eccentricus.
Dendraster
Dendraster.
eccentricus.
Eccentricus.
All right. Dendrochronology is the study of tree rings, and so the Dendraster refers to the fact that they're like a little mini tree ring, and they're eccentric. If you wanted to look up eccentric, why don't you go look in a mirror sometime? You're the kid over here playing with their toes and eating, what is this? Lemonazo shakeout candy?
It's from like Mexico or Creole. It's salt and lemon powder.
Mexico or Korea?
Creole.
Oh, Creole.
Please do.
Okay, giant sea cucumber will be the last one. These are rad. We have these here as well. You can see these in the bay. Netart's Bay has quite a few of these suckers, and they're like the little Roombas of the ocean world. They cruise around in the bottom of the ocean, and they're detritivore. They just pick up dead things, suck it up one end, poop it out the other. It is really hard to tell their mouth from their butthole. They look pretty much the same on each end. The red spines are just kind of like plasticky feeling. They're not dangerous, although it probably makes them look dangerous, so things leave them alone. They can get up to 15 inches long, so, pretty good size.
Wait, so it's like a big worm underwater.
And, yeah, exactly.
That's why it has, like, two sides and they look like two butts, because worms have, like, two butts.
No, worms have a mouth and then a butt. But you can't tell them apart.
You can't tell them apart, so people just think they have two butts.
Let's just go ahead and say the name on this one. The name on this one, repeat after me, Rory. Para. Stitch. Opus. Parastitch opus. Californicus. Californicus. Parastitch opus.
Parastitch opus.
It's okay, honey. There's always community college.
I don't want to go to community college.
Joking.
What does it mean?
Parastitch opus californicus. It means that they're a pair of stitched up things that you got from California. I really don't know. Californicus is named from where they're described. And
I should call you that.
probably do when I'm not around. All right, that's the species list this week, brought to you by Slade and
Rory Sullivan, the best teacher here.
Laters, y'all.